Hey everyone, so I got all my rear suspension pieces assembled. I've got the 9-inch painted up the way I want it, and everything is laid out and ready to go. So that's the lower control arms, which are attached to the housing. Upper control arms, got the shock tower brace and control arm reinforcement bars, rear sway bar, coil over shocks, everything is here, it's ready to go. This is actually going to be a lot easier than the front suspension. This is pretty much just bolt-in stuff. So if you can unbolt something and bolt something else back in, this is pretty much all that is taking place here. The only thing you had to modify at all was the mounting for the shocks. The top holes in the frame need to be drilled out to 3/8 in order to accept the new bolts for the coilovers. So that's it. So got everything together, and let's go ahead and get under the vehicle and start bolting all this stuff up.
Well, I've got the Ford 9-inch positioned under the vehicle. Now I went ahead and installed the upper control arms just to make it easier to mount. First things first though, I got to install the UMI upper shock tower brace. Fits in there like so. And then we're going to install the coilover pads that go underneath. So with the shock tower brace in place, you have these mounting pads for the coilover shocks that come with the QA1 shocks. So we'll install our bolts. These bolts feed through the frame, and they're going to connect with our shock tower brace, and then it will get bolted up from the top. That's fed in. Use the supplied lock washers and the nylon nuts. And get that secured in place. All right. All right, now I'm going to tighten these down, and then we'll just repeat that for the other side, and then the brace and the upper shock mounting pad will be in place, and we'll move on to bolting the rear end. So now that we have the mounting pads in place for the shocks, got the upper strut tower brace in place, we're going to start with the lower control arms. We're going to put those into place. I've applied a liberal amount of grease to the bushings. So now I'm going to get this in place, get it lined up. I'm going to have to scoot the whole rear forward here. So let's get this put up in. it's a little tight going in, but it is in. So we've got the driver's side lower control arm installed. Now you've got this control arm, you got upper and lower control arm brace. And this bar slides into place, and then it bolts in the top with the bolts for the upper control arm. And this brace adds additional rigidity and support to the frame and to your two suspension points here at the frame. So that's good. So this side's installed. Just got to do the upper control arm and do the other side, and then we'll move on to sway bar and our shocks. So I'm not going to bore you with doing this twice, but I got to do the same procedure essentially on the other side. So this is all just do one side, repeat for the other. So we'll be back when we do the upper control arms. Putting on those lower control arms, I think I should have done it the other way around. Instead of putting them in the housing, I should have put them in the frame first. Because trying to fight it to get it exactly centered so I could get the bolt through and dealing with all this weight at the same time ended up being a huge pain. So what I decided to do for the uppers were I just took them off of the bounce up here on the housing and just put them into the frame first and then put them in. And of course I didn't record any of that, but it's no different than the bottoms. You put the control arm in, bolt, nut, put the control arm down on the housing side, bolt, nut. It's pretty basic. So what I got left to do now is put on the sway bar and put on the coilover shocks. So I'm going to do the shocks now since the upper mount's already in. Lowers are mounted on the frame already, so everything's ready to go. If you watched the front shock assembly when I put it together, it's pretty much the same. You want to make sure that you put the Permatex NICs on the housing so you don't void the warranty. The only difference with the rear ones versus the front, the top part of the spring is captured in the frame. And on the rear, that's not the case. So when you put this on, for the front, I just ran the adjustment all the way down to the bottom of the housing, which is as low as the car can go. And then pretty much I'll decide how far to bring it up from there. With this one, I couldn't quite do that because you need to capture this spring. If you look, the housing on this top housing part actually fits into the top of the shock tower here. And if you don't have that adjusted to where this actually pushes the spring up and holds it in place, and you run lower than that and you have it on the car, you go over a bump or something, you could actually gap this, and then if this top cup comes out, then there's nothing holding your spring in. So from my understanding, unless you put some type of limiting strap to keep the rear from going down so far, this is about as low as you can go with the spring in the rear and not have to worry about this cup coming loose at the top. So anyway, so I've got everything in place. Bolt is here, so put the bottom of the housing in. Make sure when you're putting these shocks in, your adjustment is going to be on the outside here. You don't want it on the other side facing your drum or disc brakes. You'll never be able to adjust it, or it'll be a pain in the butt if you do. And then the top, this slides in, or it's supposed to, into the housing. And now, just need to fiddle with this, see if I can get this, so I can get the shock to cooperate with me, so I can put the bolt through. Where's mine? Here it is. I have it all. Let's see if I can get this thing straightened out where I need it. There it is. Something up there. Problem with this is I put the shock in on this side, and I think it kicked it a little bit doing that. So now I've got to get this side up to be able to get the bolt in place. Let's see if I can use my knee. Ah, there it is. Boom. So that's in. And then just thread your nut onto the, well, I'll do that one later. Thread the nut onto the bottom, thread the nut onto the top. Then everything is in place. Now I can move on to the last bit, which is putting the sway bar on, and then the rear suspension will be done. Then I can move back to the front, I think, and move on to doing the front steering. I think is where I'm going next. We'll see. Anyway, give me a second. I'm going to grab the sway bar. Then I'll come back, put that in, and we'll be done. So last night I go to put the sway bar on, and it doesn't quite want to fit. The problem was when it came back here, it was actually laying right up against the lower bracket on the 9-inch for the lower control arm. It was like wedged right in there, and that was all the adjustment I could get at it. Now the sway bar has some slots in it, and the front one was long enough, but the back one, I just couldn't push the sway bar any more forward to get it to fit. So what I did was I put it on the bench, and I elongated the hole in the sway bar for that rear bolt. And then I also, I don't know if you can notice this, you probably can, I actually made a small notch in the housing. Not much to where it would cause any issues with stability, but just enough to where it gave it a little bit of free room. Now, I don't blame UMI for this. Their sway bar is a bolt-in, and honestly, I blame myself. Because if I had bothered to check the sway bar fitment when the rear was sitting over on the floor, I might have noticed that was an issue, and I could have fixed it then without having to do all this on the vehicle. And that's pretty much my fault for not checking the clearance and everything prior to doing it. And let's be honest, it's an aftermarket rear, aftermarket control arms, and aftermarket sway bar. So if you think all that stuff is going to go together and there's not going to be at least a little bit of clearance issue that you're going to have to fix, I guess again, because that stuff is just, it's just the way it works. It's how it happens. So got it on now. Everything's fitted up. It's beautiful. Love it. So shocks are on. I've got my the upper brace, and I've got the control arm braces on. Everything is together. So let me clean up my mess, and I'll come back and I'll just show a quick look at the entire thing. I'll get like a standoff pic, and then I'll actually show you what my one-off rim looks like mounted on the car. It's kind of exciting. Anyway, give me a second to clean my mess. I'll be back. There's the whole enchilada. Everything put together. Only thing I haven't done is torque down the upper and lower control arms. I won't do that until it's back on the ground or up on jack stands by the rear, so I can get all the body weight on it. And then I'll torque all that stuff down. Same thing as the front. But that's everything. That's the upper and lower control arms, control arm braces, the shock tower brace from UMI, QA1 shocks, and the UMI sway bar, and of course the aftermarket 9-inch rear. So that is everything together, and I'm so excited because technically I could put wheels on all 4 corners and put this thing on the ground, which it hasn't touched Mother Earth in a while. So I'm excited about that. So till the next installment, see you guys.